and it kept on like glitching and going so slowly, or not even showing the video at all. So we'll give this a shot, or just show you my computer screen.
Definitely consider myself.
This is with Parker and the guy competing against Nancy Pelosi in San Fran. So we'll see how this runs.
Progressive. A little bit of background on myself. I worked on Bernie's campaign in 2016 as the director of organizing technology there. And after that campaign, I started this group called Justice Democrats. And our goal really was to recruit Democrats all around the country to primary corporate-backed Democrats with sort of grassroots-funded Democrats. And we were originally going to try to recruit hundreds of people, ended up recruiting a few dozen. But one of the people we recruited was AOC. And so I ended up running her first campaign. And after she won, I went into Congress with her as her first chief of staff. And in Congress, the main job I had in her office was to write and launch the Green New Deal. And I'd say a lot of my sort of political philosophy here, it really boils down to, if we can't use...
I understand when people say like about Green New Deal and whatnot, the Green New Scam, as they say. And I don't know. The fact is that now solar is less expensive than the energy that we used to get there. So unless you're in a super cheap state like Las Vegas, Nevada, I think rates are really cheap there. So you got to weigh and balance, how much money are you saving day one. But if you're saving money day one and it's less expensive than buying from the utility, and the utility still gets their $20 customer charge that they have to charge everybody just to be connected to the grid, because that's technically a monopoly, then so be it. But as long as the pricing works out, it's great. So what do you call it? And that just happened 2 years ago, where solar is now overall across the U.S. less expensive than buying electricity from the grid, which is a mix of everything with very little renewables. What do you call it? And so if it's more expensive, then I understand people being like Green New Scam. But if it's less expensive, it's really a no-brainer. So and I guess it took a while for that to happen, but now it is less expensive. And yeah, if you check out Nature's Fortune, Mark Tursek, the investment into nature and the return on that investment is ridiculous. So yeah,
the government to dramatically improve people's lives, then people are going to start voting for authoritarians more and more. Really, like that's the only way I think we defeat this sort of rise in fascism that we see today. I think we have to do what FDR did, right, where he built this whole new economy and this whole new society, and that's the way he defeated the far right movement of back then, which was really powerful.
Yeah, compare and despair. So I don't want to compare anybody or our time to FDR. The whole rhymes. It rhymes. It doesn't repeat history. But yeah, how to benefit people's lives, and I don't know. That just goes so much more. I mean, our founders talked about enlightenment, and that's where they saw the pursuit of happiness. So if we have a method and a exact formula about how to cause more people to be happy, forget about policies. Never mind policies. We'll get to the policies, but let's first have more and more people happier and wealthier. And once we have those things, the policies are going to write themselves. Like, if everyone in Congress is happy and wealthy, the policies are going to benefit everybody. But the issues are anger and upset and miscommunication.
Happening in Madison Square Garden back in the 1930s. And FDR defeated that by, through the New Deal and through the mobilization from World War II. So a lot of what I'm pushing for, sort of policy-wise, is, yes, Medicare for all, tuition-free public colleges, universal child care. I talk about building.
Yeah, again, the policies will come. The methods behind three-year-olds in a supportive environment, and by all means, women, if they can spend the time, up to 3 without working or bringing the kid to work, then that's wonderful. And I see the opportunity for entrepreneurs to have like a daycare center within the building where people are working, so that they can be together. So yeah, the exact methodology to be executed to achieve these things, um, there's a million thousand different ways to execute those things, and those things would come out of us being happy. And again, wealth and riches are two different things, but would come out of us being happy and wealthy. Um, will create those thousand different openings for action, and then some states choose one actions, other states choose other actions, but it's all for the grand scheme of us being happier and wealthier. I'm just gonna flip this. Wow. Okay. So orientation is locked. So if I start it out flipped, then maybe I'll be able to do the whole thing flipped. All right. Well, this is a test that
I think millions of units of affordable housing to get rents and concept. But I also talk about how do we actually build up high wage industries and the high value jobs.
And if you want to see this video on Claude,
So I think that's really what's going on.
Parker get a job. I spoke to a progressive, can win against.
Skyrocketing, and that's why people vote for whoever pops up that says, "I'm gonna, fix this rigged economy and this rigged political system."
Yeah, I definitely think that's a very good explanation for why people tend to go towards authoritarian, and oftentimes they try to brand themselves as anti-corruption, but inevitably they're actually corrupt in of itself. But so I guess I guess one point that I've definitely found interest in and definitely wanted to address is corruption, and I think that you've made a very important aspect of your campaign. What would you specifically do to address the level of corruption that is within our current Congress so that we can bring about that level of drastic change necessary?
Yeah, I mean,
I think you're gonna have a really, really challenging time doing that. I think the answer is to win on vibes, and then excuse me, and then you can deal with that stuff. The Justice Department can deal with that stuff. Congress can deal with that stuff. Executive needs to bring the country together. Let's rock.
Corruption, I think, should be the number one issue that Democrats run on.
And the happier people are, the less they want to steal money and finagle and do things in different ways. And if you're happy and wealthy, you don't need to get involved in that sort of stuff. Oh, I'll just do one more stealing. It's like
especially going into 2028. And there's two kinds of corruption in our system, right? There's one corruption, which is politicians enriching themselves. And that really, to me, boils down to members of Congress trading stocks and members of Congress joining the lobbying industry after Congress. And here's a wild thing I learned when I was a chief of staff in Congress is when you're on the House floor and you're doing votes, staffers and stuff are not allowed on the House floor, but members of Congress are and former members of Congress are. So you have all these former members of Congress on the House floor who are now lobbyists, who are literally there talking to, Congress people as they're about to vote, telling them hey, remember the way you're supposed to be voting, right? So that is one form of corruption. The other form is just big money in politics. And, we have overwhelming bipartisan support in this country for getting rid of both of these. It's 80-90% support for banning members of Congress from trading stock, banning revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry, and overturning Citizens United. So we have to get this stuff done. My approach to this is if I get into Congress, I'm going to make a bunch of noise on it. Basically, I'm going to do something called a discharge petition, which is basically a way to force a vote on an issue that the House Speaker is sort of keeping off the floor. Right now, Rokana and Massey are doing this on the FT files, but they're trying to force a vote on releasing the FT files, right? I'm going to do that for a congressional stock trading ban on day one. I think it's the way to forefront the issue, forefront corruption, both messaging-wise, and actually there's a small chance I get it done. There's a bunch of Republicans who want to do it too.
Creators, take these 3 apps I built to run.
Pause this while so yeah, it'll be nice to have younger people that are more representation, or there's a lot of different ways to do it. That's not ages to older people. It's just having more young representation as well.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important move as well. How do you see getting social media involved with this sort of anti-corruption idea to be a relevant aspect of enforcing it within the political spectrum? And kind of what I mean from that is how much influence do you think social media has over how politicians view these different types of issues in terms of corruption? Can we use social media as a mechanism to then change the different positions of people in Congress or of people who are running in order to be able to get better politicians into place?
Absolutely. And I don't even make the distinction anymore between social media and just reality, because I think social media has gotten so big. This is where people are getting their news, is where people are learning about what's going on in Congress. I think a lot of people on social media, people like you, Parker, are the folks people are listening to and watching to understand what's actually happening, and the folks that people trust to give them information, right? Mainstream media has really just, I think, destroyed itself. I think people don't trust mainstream media anymore, and it's just kind of a show, it's a dog and pony show. So I think the main way you do create accountability in Congress right now is by messaging on social media, going, talking to people like you on social media, have a big platform, and also doing your own messaging on it. It's the way to get this stuff out. Otherwise, people just don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing I could ask is there any type of messaging that could exist on, maybe the floor in Congress that you could do towards other types of individuals that are in Congress to be able to create messaging, or would you see it to be better in terms of messaging to try and, actively get those on your side privately? What would be the messaging in terms of, I guess, getting people to then come to a resolution together about that?
I think it's both. So I'll give you an example. When we did the Green New Deal work, what we were trying to do in that moment was we were really trying to change the conversation around climate change. Because at the time, sort of all the plans to tackle climate change were woefully inadequate. I'd say even Bernie, I love Bernie, but Bernie's 2016 climate plan was 80% reduction by 2050 through carbon taxes. This wasn't big enough. So we were trying to really get everyone to up the ambition on climate change, and we were trying to introduce this new idea, which was this idea of to tackle this, we actually have to build these high-wage clean industries, and that's going to take this whole other approach to governing and these whole new institutions, this whole new way of financing. Now, the reason I bring it up is it was really a political strategy to do that. And part of that strategy was me on the inside talking to people privately, trying to get people onto the bill, making all the phone calls. But on the outside, we had Sunrise Movement doing sit-ins, pressuring, doing social media campaigns, creating the outside pressure. It's a combination of those two. There's pressure from the outside, and there's people on the inside saying, oh, hey, I'm playing the good cop, sign on to the bill. I can tell the Sunrise kids to stop doing sit-ins if you do that, right? That's how you actually get movement to happen. And that was why every single person running for president in the 2020 primary ended up either endorsing the Green New Deal or pitching their own, really large climate change plan. They all embraced the idea of industrial policy using climate change as a way to create jobs. Even Joe Biden had to respond and build back better. It wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but it was amazing. It was still the largest investment in climate change in history when it actually passes the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think that sort of inside-outside, use social media and do stuff on the inside privately, that's the strategy to actually get this stuff done.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think that making it like a view in terms of national politics, especially with these different types of progressive matters, is important because it then gets people to respond because this is an issue that needs to be addressed. It gets it to the forefront of people acknowledging that it needs to be addressed. And similarly with healthcare as well. I think that there was significantly more pressure on that, especially in the past, for Democrats to have a progressive policy when it comes to healthcare. And I feel like that's going to be less so now because I think a lot of Democrats are trying to say oh, I think the country is a lot more right wing because Republicans have won. So they seemingly think that the country is more right wing rather than realizing that their base still really wants this from them and still really advocating for this. But because so many harmful things are happening, all of our attention is towards all the harmful things that are happening. It's not built on that coalition building around what's going to be the healthcare policy, what's going to be the climate change policy, and almost especially even on social media, that's not at the forefront of what people are caring about in terms of what they're looking at. And it's something I think that needs to be addressed even to a greater extent. Yes, what we had with the Inflation Reduction Act was the largest investment in renewable energy ever, but we need to build upon that and we need to keep moving on. And especially when we have someone who's anti-science in the person in office like Donald Trump, who literally believes the climate's going to start cooling and that science just doesn't know it yet, which is actually absurdly insane. There's plenty of other instances of being anti-science. It sets us back. So we need to have progressive messaging here in 2028 that actually addresses climate change. Otherwise, it seems like we're just getting up, and that's why I totally agree. It's really important to bring that to the forefront because it might not be the policy that we inevitably get, but it can at least get other Democrats to start having messaging and talking about it.
Well, just to add on to that, I think it's right that people are really afraid of the authoritarian rise right now. I think that's the focus. But that doesn't mean we don't.
When it comes to goals in general, but especially financial goals, when we're building this life together.
Yeah, someone said money. Mr. Krabs, certainly.
So
integrity in finance is purely a positive phenomenon. It's a paper written by Harvard in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, I'm not sure. And yeah, if these major corporations can see how much more money they could make if they were just inserted integrity they would double their productivity. So it's about these corporations being able to see how they can actually increase profits by selling things that empower and make people healthier versus the other way around. Anyway.
What is the solution to that? And I really think of climate change not just a way to tackle climate change, but as a way to build up the new economy that will actually increase wages and actually get people good jobs and reindustrialize the Midwest, get rid of these underlying issues that led to Trump in the first place.
Yes, I think you're addressing that sort of concern that people have. We're losing jobs. We aren't going to be the same type of industrial power as we were, which to some extent, right, we don't want to be industrial power like we were. We want to progress with the time with renewable energy, what the modern day is going to be, and also have specialized manufacturing. Those things are really important, and obviously we did that way better than Trump did, actually declining real manufacturing investment under both of his administrations so far. But I guess a question I would have specifically about authoritarianism is, what would be your plan to address, say, Donald Trump's authoritarianism as you're going to be, if you get elected here in 2026, you're going to be in office for years when Trump is in office. What would you do to respond to Trump's authoritarianism, or what would you try to make light of specifically to, I guess, distinct yourself from other Democrats, I guess?
Yeah, I think right now in this moment, people in power really need to see our roles not just as lawmakers, because we're not going to get any good laws passed anyway, right? We're supposed to be organizers, and there's power.
More people being happy, healthy, wealthy, wise, free from anxiety, free from resentment, free from regret, possessing a peace of mind, a systematic method on how to get those things back when you lose them. We're not perfect. I don't never get angry. I get angry. Okay, but I'm able to catch myself and get back to happiness quickly, so it doesn't mess up my day. You ever stub your toe and then the next thing you know, something else bad happens and something else bad happens. It's like three, So, but if you can catch yourself after the first one, or not even have the first one to begin with, and be like the Matrix and being able to see life in the moment at your job with your spouse, seeing everything, doing the lean back thing. Yeah, we could use an apolitical approach to this. We can go back to fighting in the 2030s, 2040s, but for right now, an apolitical approach, please.
Is this constant process of making the abnormal normal, right? So you're just constantly pushing the bounds. At this point, it's become completely normalized to have mass agents on the streets, putting people down marked bands, right? Trump is trying to normalize putting the military into cities. He's trying to normalize all the, he just normalized these boats off the coast of Venezuela, random civilians, completely illegal, right? But just keep doing it and seeing if there's no accountability on it. So 2 things. One thing that you got to do if you're an elected member of Congress is you should actually be on the front lines confronting ICE directly. Try to put it on them to escalate the situation. Be nonviolent about it, right? But it's
Oh yeah, as far as right now though, he's gonna lay down some good points. I'm sure those are good too. But everybody doing what they're doing. Newsom doing what he's doing. All the independent media outlets doing what they're doing. Just everybody, however you can contribute, showing up, being out, taking out your camera and recording, like any way that you show your own self-expression, that's how you contribute. And you don't need to rely on the politicians. They've did that for too long.
We see that sort of pattern when ICE was in MacArthur Park in LA and all the investigations put in deep, and eventually ICE left, right? If you just stick on it, you have to put in daily legwork to just like keep back this kind of this tide of authoritarianism that's like, I don't know, you keep pushing your way. We need to be thinking of our roles as organizers of civil society. When we don't have political power, civil society is our bulwark against authoritarianism. So what I mean by that is when Trump is coming after law firms or universities or now media companies, it's easy for him to pick them off one by one. But if they were able to organize collectively as a block, then it's much harder. Then Trump can't have go after every law firm. Every law firm says we're not going to represent you if you come after us like this. But it's really hard for the law firms to organize each other. So I do think members of Congress, people with political power, they have to call up the CEOs. They have to actually do the work of kind of organize them and say, hey, we got your back from a political standpoint. If you guys all organize effectively and oppose Trump, we're going to back you up on that, right? And the other piece of this is we just have to, like every day in Congress, like on the legislative side, there's moments where Democrats actually have leverage. If we're fleet-footed, if we organize, I mean, right now with the budget showdown, I think Democrats have real leverage. We should not be funding a government that is going to use that money to just increase the authoritarian police state, which is what we're seeing right now. But we just take it seriously. I really think the Democrats right now are not taking this moment seriously. They're thinking of this as like a normal political moment where the pendulum's going to swing back our way. We'll win the next election. Maybe, right? Maybe. But then what's going to happen after that? Or are we even going to have free elections? Are we looking into the election systems all around the country? The county election boards where Republicans have been taking over county election seats all over the country. So there's a lot we have to do. It's just daily effort and it's daily legwork. We're not going to be able to do one thing and stop the authoritarianism. We have to just keep that bait until we win elections, and we can do the right thing after that.
Yeah, I think it's really important for Democrats to realize that this is not like a normal sort of situation. I think that after when Donald Trump tries to normalize this, it's incredibly harmful. I think one thing I saw you talk about recently was how Donald Trump was trying to put his leg in with doing something in terms of like attacking free speech, and then he like kind of sits down on it, doesn't do anything, and then later we'll try to attack it later on, and then people won't really address it as much because he already did that earlier. So would you like to maybe address more on that in terms of like how do you see like us maybe providing a response to that? How could we?
Yeah, the context here, I basically think Donald Trump is trying to inoculate society and markets against his moves. So he does this interesting thing where he'll always do a really splashy sort of attack on rights first. So he did this with deporting Mario Garcia to CCOT. There's a big reaction to that. Chris Van Hollen went down and Mario Garcia got out. But then a few months later,
Yo, get Newsom just freaking start attacking, start going on the telling just waiting for them to do it and then copy it and do it better, which he's doing. Start threatening Trump's free speech for fun. Anyway, Newsom's doing great.
Anyway, Collier got detained for free speech, for free speech, right? And there's a reaction. He got out, and now months later, I'm hearing Collier about to get deported to Syria or Algeria. He did this with the terrorists, like at the beginning, he would announce these terrorists in really big flashy way, make a lot of noise, and then eventually got to a point where he first market for tanking, but now.
What really happens when you post on
What else? So yeah, people above policies, people above all else. I want to make sure that Marjorie Taylor Greene and your constituents are happy, healthy, wealthy, wise, free from anxiety, free from resentment, free from regret, peace of mind, anything you want. I don't want to put words into your mouth either. You tell me what you want and we'll make it happen. But if you want something, okay. So is it Russia wants to take part of Ukraine, and if Russia did take part of Ukraine, Putin would therefore then be happy. Let's think about it backwards. Let's create a happy, wealthy Russia, and then you can pull out. You don't have to do anything else. All right, let's just skip this out of here. Ba-boom.
So he does this inoculation strategy. I think what we have to do is actually stick with it. Think about how the Republicans stuck on that story of Hunter Biden's laptop for like 4 years. They did not let it go. And so instead of us doing this thing where we're just like running around with like chickens with our heads cut off and going after everything that Trump's doing, we actually have to pick stuff and stick with it. Which I'd say, we actually did with Mario Garcia. That was like one example where Chris Van Hollen stuck with it, the Democrats stuck with it, and you started to see Trump's numbers on immigration plummeting. You started to see Trump backing away on some of the stuff he's doing on immigration. That's the kind of strategy you need on messaging. Is you have to remember most people in the country, they don't have the same, they're not paying attention to every single thing that's happening all the time the way politicians in there are. So you have to continuously talk about it. And when you're tired of talking about it, then maybe you've gotten through like half the country.
Yeah, I guess one thing that's often on people's minds is, do you think it's possible to change people's minds en masse and get them to realize the destructive and authoritarian policies of Trump? Because oftentimes people will act like it's normal, kind of what you said. It's been very normalized for them because Donald Trump's in a position of power. How could a person who's so bad get in that position? I've had people ask me this question directly, like they genuinely don't believe that what Trump is doing is bad, just because there's no way if someone was bad they would be able to get in this position. I've had Trump supporters literally say that to me online. So I guess, do you think that there's a way to counter that?
I do, and I think a lot of it is constantly trying to show how it is abnormal. And I really feel like, that sort of fatigue I'm talking about where we just stop paying attention to whatever Trump's doing. It's not just being normalized by politicians. I see the media doing it too. Like I see the New York Times reporting on these clearly illegal actions. They're not saying in every single article, this is illegal. This has never been done before. Just like putting it in context. Most people don't know the context. Most people don't know what, when is it okay for the government to people and not people? Because the government does people in war, right? So what's wrong with them? Some goes off the coast of Venezuela. So you have to actually contextualize it. You have to actually tell people this is abnormal. And I will say, I think the right does that. Like when the right went after, their claims of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden having a quid pro quo with Ukraine, that there's a corruption scandal there with Burisma, they would constantly talk about in every box news article how this is abnormal, how this has never happened before, but yada yada yada, right? We have to do that. We have to remember that most people, as you said, don't necessarily have the context to know what Trump is doing is good or bad or normal or abnormal.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important messaging. And I mean, especially like one thing that I've been doing on my life, which is obviously something someone can do in general, is getting people to visualize, why is it the case that they couldn't just arrest people? If it is the case that they think that they've done something illegal, why couldn't they arrest them? Why is it the case that they have to, like genuinely, and no one can ever provide a response to that. It's clearly in that sense, they see it from the example, absurd to them. Even if they did believe that something quote unquote illegal was happening, which they didn't even determine through due process, they still don't have reason to do that. So I guess getting people to realize in that respect, it's clearly abnormal. It is absolutely authoritarian behavior, and it's a violation of rights granted under constitutional protections in many instances outside of the context in which we're talking about anyone within the jurisdiction of the United States for constitutional rights.
The due process piece, something else I always try to hammer home is they frame the whole debate as, in terms of undocumented immigrants, as saying, yeah, well, undocumented immigrants don't deserve due process. We have to make it clear to people that due process is how you determine whether someone is illegal. That's how you determine who somebody is. Without due process, if you're saying no due process for undocumented immigrants, that's the same as no due process for anybody, right? Because who's determining that? Is this an ICE agency in your brown and picking you up? That's what's determining it, right? And I really want to make sure everybody talks about this every single time.
Oh, I see. So eventually YouTube, are they cutting out my picture? Oh, wait, no, there it is back. It's back.
You're making that clear.
I think it's just showing the audio.
The majority of Americans to the fates of whatever marginalized group.
So what did the AI figure out that I'm showing another video, and then they just...
Is being attacked because it is tied. It is tied.
Yeah, I absolutely totally agree with you there. I totally agree. I think it's incredibly important to address this. Like, the average person is not going to know it's some out of the ordinary thing unless it is the case that you have some type of commentary or talk about it or some broad scale messaging. And I do think that the right has a significantly more constructed ecosystem, especially on social media and in the media space in general, that the Democrats don't have, which I think that progressives need to realize that there's a vacuum there and that we need to be the ones to fill that vacuum rather than it being like corporate Democrats, that don't really want to, actually advocate for policies to benefit the average American to the degree that we can be advocating for. Because the right already sees us as this progressive monster anyway. That we're so absurd, we're like socialists anyway, we're already Marxist and communist to Donald Trump. So the idea that we're just going to be branded as progressive is already the case. So why don't we talk about what progressivism actually is, like feeding children, providing access to childcare, healthcare, doing something about climate change, which a lot of people don't realize there are a lot of more net benefits in the long term in terms of health benefits if we address climate change. There's a lot of health impacts that come from pollution, right, that people don't take into account, and they often think that it's just going to be harmful to our economy to address climate change or to impose a regulation, but they don't realize the importance from an economic perspective about those types of regulations. And I also think that's something that progressives need to talk about as well, is that it's economically more efficient to impose climate change regulations, and it will lead to more net benefits in the long run.
Sin ofender, pero si estás pagando más de $30 al mes.
Generate tons and tons of money by taking care of the environment. We cut off all the migration paths for these animals. Anyway, you got it.
People are really open to some message of sweeping economic change. I really think that's what people thought they were voting for Barack Obama in 2008. I think that's what people thought they were voting for Donald Trump. But people are really open to the type of change. I actually don't think the majority of the American population is so ideologically, constrained. They're really open to they're going to get one side a chance. If they can't fix, they're going to give the other side a chance, right? So what are we going to do when we get that chance? And especially when it comes to these issues that we talk about, even things like universal healthcare, universal childcare, climate change. I talk about this in my campaign a lot. All of these economic issues are actually overwhelmingly popular. Not just in places like San Francisco, but across the country. If you do the polling, most of the people are on our side. So I really hate the frame of it being a progressive versus moderate thing. I really think it's a do nothing establishment versus a new wave of people who actually want to do something thing. That's the real divide I saw in Congress. It was people in Congress who did not want to actually take action. One, because they're always worried that they're going to piss off their donors, right? And two, it's just easier to not take action. If you don't take action, there's no Republican attack ads are going to get run on you. It's just this feeling of if I say nothing and do nothing, and if I fade into the background, maybe I won't get attacked and I can keep my seat. And I just think that era of politics is really what's dying. That's something I won't cut it. We have to do something. We have to do something big.
Yeah, I think that's too risk averse. I totally agree with you, and I don't think that it's recognizing what life is like for the average American living paycheck to paycheck, can't afford a random $400 expense, right? Is not able to afford their medical bills because over 130 million Americans have medical debt in this country and they're struggling with it. So it's where is the messaging? Especially there's none from Republicans. Trump was able to run and get elected off of having just concepts of a plan for healthcare. That should never be a conversation that's allowed. There should have been so much more pressure on that. There's been so much more conversation about the policy, and I think that corporate Democrats are too risk adverse on the worst things possible. They're risk adverse on addressing and attacking them in terms of the different types of clearly absurd positions they had. The economic views were absurd. There was definitely not addressing on how absurd the economic views were, especially directed towards Republicans. I feel like so I definitely do agree with you very much there, and I do think that America's ready for drastic change and drastic positive change. I just think that we're definitely normalized into thinking that it's not possible to a certain extent. Within plenty of aspects, but I mean, obviously there's an extent. We can only change so much within a short period of time. So I'm not thinking that we're going to have the most change possible, but I do think that over time we can have that change. We need to be optimistic around that. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to create those movements in the first place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this boils down to can you have candidates in Congress that people trust to be actually working on this stuff? Yeah, we're not going to be able to have Medicare all pop up overnight, but you can get to a path there. And so much of that boils down to money in politics. And I think in this current issue, honestly, a lot of it boils down to your position on the conflict in Israel and Palestine, whether or not you're going to be taking AIPAC money or money from the lobbyists. And that issue, it just creates such a gulf where the huge majority of the Democratic Party and huge majority of the country believe that we should stop funding Israel. And yet, you've got the vast majority of Congress voting against the will of the people, right? And what's the answer to that other than money, right? Money is the answer. And so so I think it's become like that has become proxy for are you bought out or not. And I think that's ended up being like one of the major issues. So I really believe like the Democratic Party does not realize how much damage it's doing to itself. It thinks it's just like one issue of any, but I don't think they realize that this is the issue that's defining whether or not you're a party we can trust.
Yeah, and I do think that a genuine test that's going to be applied to a lot of Democrats is: do you condemn Gaza? Do you think that we should stop arming Israel? And if you're not willing to do that, right, then why are you not willing to hold that position? I think that needs to have a lot more pressure, especially from like the debate side, like in any type of debate. I think that like really the pressure, any type of candidate that is taking money, from any type of specific special interest group in order to be able to hold a particular position, especially that is vastly against what most Americans are clearly seeing right to be the case when it comes to in Gaza, and people are actually like completely waking up to that and being able to acknowledge that. I've seen over months and months and months the increasing amount of people who are waking up and recognizing that, and it's definitely a change. It's definitely changed. It's not the same old media landscape where everyone's just going to be accepting the pro-Israel talking points. There is a genuine pushback on that now from both sides, not only on the left but also on the right. So that's definitely going to be a test for sure.
Yeah, and and I think it was huge political delta. Like that delta is also the case on things like Medicare for all, on taxing the rich, right? Like something like a wealth tax, on things like banning congressional stock trading, banning revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry, getting rid of big money in politics, universal child care, tuition-free public college, like all this stuff. Again, it's overwhelmingly popular, and yet why can't people in Congress even say they're for it? Whether or not we can get it all done overnight is one question, but why not even try to push for it? Why not be for it, right? And so I actually think we're going to have an opportunity in 2028 where we could see a big sea change. There's going to be a bunch of candidates who take advantage of that political opportunity, frankly, right? Like here's a layup. Here are all these issues that the vast majority of people are saying we want, but these politicians are not going to be for. So how do you beat those politicians? Just be for those issues. Not just because it's morally right, it's politically smart.
Yeah, and like the media not wanting to cover that, right, is going to be also like a barrier that every candidate who's progressive is going to have to get past. And at some point, they do have to start talking about you. They can only not talk about you for so long. So I guess what actual steps do you think that you could take, similarly to how Zoran is taken specifically to be able to popularize himself from the national lens and in the local lens specifically to be able to build up your campaign to actively be able to beat Nancy Pelosi? What actual steps do you think that you can take by election time?
Well, it's been fascinating, honestly, because I ran AOC's campaign in 2018, and there was a bit of an appetite for change back then. Trump had just won, Democrats were really upset with the party, and that was really the context in which I think something like AOC's campaign was possible. She was the right candidate, kind of the right moment with the right message, because Democrats were also looking for what would come next. And the level of appetite for change I see right now completely dwarfs what I saw in 2018. I mean, we had our office opening party a couple months ago, about a year after the election, and over 500 people showed up. Which, to put that in context, when we did AOC's largest rally 2 months before her election, had about 40 people. And I'm not AOC levels, as a politician. People are not coming here to see me. They're coming because this moment is completely different. And I think a few things have made it different. One is, of course, Trump being elected again. Just like this deep frustration with the Democratic Party.
After they removed the link, I no longer find that result.
All right, so this seems like a workable thing as long as I can go sideways.
But the other thing is,
I could do
social media is way bigger now. The way I got to that 500 people showing up and hearing about me in the first place, I did videos on TikTok and Instagram for the first several months of my campaign. And that's how people heard about it. And that's how they learned that there's a serious challenger, Nancy Pelosi. And that's like such a key part of this right now, is you have to take advantage of the tools of communication available to you. I think it's really interesting that whenever we have these past sort of political eras pop up where you have sort of generational change. I'm thinking about like FDR in the 1930s, I'm thinking about Reagan in the 80s. Each of these people, they came in, they ushered in this whole new political era. FDR really created the New Deal era from the 40s up until Reagan. And in that era, even the Republicans had to govern as sort of New Deal style Republicans, right? And Reagan did the same thing, and someone like Clinton had to govern as like a Reagan style Republican or Reagan style Democrat. And the reason I bring it up is like Reagan was this combination of like a whole new kind of politics and a whole new kind of policy and radio. It was a new communication technology. Or sorry, not Reagan, FDR was, right? And Reagan was a new politics and new policy, and TV, was really taken off then. And I think we're seeing the confluence of that right now too, with what is the new policy going to be, what are the new policies going to be, and how do you communicate that in the age of social media? We need to have candidates who can actually use this tool to get the message out. But it's really exciting because it does mean that you can get around all the gatekeepers to get your message out and build a real movement. And it's translating to on the ground movement. That was a test of the office opening party. It's like, well, all the social media stuff turned to real people showing up to an office party, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was realizing, was that the way that we can counter the mainstream media not addressing these types of claims, especially in the beginning, is by going on social media, building it up there, and then forcing them to talk about it by ensuring that there's already a set of popular opinion for it. I think that's the way that we respond to it, and I think that's one of the best ways to get people together to do this. So I think that's also an incredibly important thing as well. So I guess another question that I would have on I don't want to entirely make this national. I know I mostly address national for any viewers that be watching in local areas. That's totally me, not you at all. I do just want to say, what are actual steps within your local area that you would want to do specifically to benefit the life of people that are living in that area at this particular time period, and then also steps that you would take on the national level as well, specifically to be able to try to address making things better as well, outside of corruption and healthcare and climate change is the one we've already addressed.
Yeah, so I'd say at a local level in this moment, the most important thing I think any congressional representative could be doing is playing defense for your constituents. Most people don't realize this, but your congressperson is supposed to be your main point of contact to the federal government. So that means if the federal government does anything wrong by you, say you have a spouse that gets detained into ICE, or you have like a citizenship application that's being held up, you're supposed to go call your congressional representative, and we are supposed to be able to advocate for you and fight for you. And it actually really worked. I helped set up AOC's Constituent Services Office when she was in Congress, and that was during Trump's first term. So he was doing this all-out war on immigrants. She was in the most immigrant-heavy district in the country, and I really saw how you can pick up the phone and actually fight against the corporate bureaucracy as a congressional representative. And I've had several people. I do these voter calls every day. I talk to anybody in San Francisco can go to my website and sign up for a Zoom call with me. and they're small, 5 to 20 people calls. And I've had several people show up who, had certain things happen against them. Like there was one person who showed up who had an agency or her department at the state agency got defunded by Doge, and she called Pelosi's office, never heard back, called the senator, and senator advocated for her and got the money back, right? So that's the kind of work that is, again, like the daily work of a congressional representative that really makes a difference, and that would be absolutely my number one focus in my first term, because I'm not going to be able to get a lot of structural changes done. But the other thing I'm trying to really talk about in this campaign is how a lot of these national issues that we think of, they really are coming home to roost locally. Like when I talk about universal healthcare, yeah, that's for everybody around the country. But if you look at the city budget in San Francisco, the biggest reason that our costs in the city budget have been going up, our employee costs have been going up, are healthcare benefits. And healthcare costs are skyrocketing. That's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And it's completely unsustainable if our only solution to that is for the city to have to cut other services because we can't solve healthcare, right? I just think we're at a point where all these big problems nationally, if we can't fix it structurally, the country's at a breaking point. And so, I think I talk about universal healthcare, universal childcare. I talk about tuition-free public college. I talk about energy. This is also another local issue. There's actually federal law that says San Francisco is supposed to have public power, and PG&E, which is our our industrial utility, got in the way, and they're not letting us have it. Well, if I become a member of Congress, I will make their lives very uncomfortable by trying to force the federal law to get public power in San Francisco, and that would cut our utility bills by 40%. Because that's what Sacramento has right now. That's how much they pay, right? So a lot is about how do we actually make life affordable.
Can you believe that this guy in this picture is me? I didn't realize how bad my hair loss was until I've seen the transformation that it is now.
Yeah, there are virtually free, super inexpensive, less than what people pay ways to be happy, healthy, wealthy, wise, all those things.
Have a medical expense, I'm going to become homeless.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's especially from the national level, it affects our local politics and how we are on a local basis as well. So I think that there is, national level that obviously needs to be addressed. And obviously, like from a national perspective, because I'm always talking about the national perspective, I'm of course going to say that. But also, like I understand, especially from a local perspective, again, we can do so much as we can in a local perspective as well. Like you can address people's concerns in terms of electricity, you can address people's concerns in terms of roads, you can address people's concerns in terms of how are we setting up buses right in the city. Those are always things that you can address. And I think that that's an incredibly important thing to do.
Yeah, and I honestly, I often talk about how San Francisco really is kind of a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the country, because a lot of the issues that we face, they're really acute here. Like our levels of inequality and our cost of living crisis are really bad in San Francisco, but you really do see versions of it all across the country. And that's one reason I really talk about how we need to address this stuff at a national level if we want San Francisco, to be a livable city and a place where working people can live.
Yeah, I totally agree. Is there anything you would like to end our conversation with at all?
Well, I just want to say one piece of this campaign that I'm trying to emphasize is I am trying to recruit and talk.
I don't know if he said something about housing. It sounded like San Fran housing. Yeah, absolutely. Public-private partnership would end the homeless issue overall. And also they're doing it's great. What was it? Was it Channel 5 video on Portland? Shows how they actually interact with homeless people that actually gets results versus not getting results, as far as them like wanting to interact with us. You know what I mean? I say them and us, but I mean homeless people interacting with people that can support them.
Talk to people all around the country who are also running, because I do think going into 2026 and going into 2028, the only way we defeat this authoritarianism is if we get a group of Democrats who are really ready to fight the fascism right now, but who are really committed to doing these big structural changes, who won't be bought off by corporate donors. And that's the movement that needs to go in there with me, because I'm not going to be able to do this stuff on my own, right? And so if anybody watching right now has been thinking about jumping in and running for office,
it's not even just being bought off by corporate donors. It is having the backbone to tell the corporate donors the way that they can get what they want while also getting what the people want.
This, or if you know some great leader in your community who you think should run, you can go to my website and tell them to click run with me and nominate them. So that's one thing I'm trying to do. But also anyone here who is in San Francisco, please sign up to volunteer, because one thing I did say is part of how we do this locally, national media is a strategy, but another piece is we are running canvases every day. It's going to be a massive door knocking campaign, kind of like what's around in New York. That's how we're actually going to get around the gatekeepers locally to make sure everyone hears about the campaign. But the other piece is, I mentioned these voter calls I do every day. That's honestly been a great way for me to get to know people and recruit people. So if you live in the Bay and heard this and you're interested, sign up for a voter call with me. It's the first thing. When you go to my website, you sign up.
Cool, that's nice. I was going to do this Fox collapses.
Are you sick and tired of treating your...
Might just touch. I don't know who's reporting on this.
But there was a way to create online income.
State regime media known as Fox is spiraling out of control on live TV as Donald Trump is making an absolute mess over the messaging regarding this disastrous shutdown. The American people, by overwhelming amounts right now, they ain't buying what Donald Trump and state regime propaganda media are selling. A new Washington Post poll shows that by about a 17-point margin, more people are blaming MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump for the Trump-Jeffrey Epstein shutdown, as many people are calling it. So what do you think Fox is talking about? How do they want to grapple with this issue? Clearly, they're going to talk about Sydney Sweeney's jeans. Yeah, they're still talking about Sydney Sweeney's jeans. Here, play this clip.
I might have him on right now. But I don't understand this controversy. I mean, she's a talented young actress. She's a beautiful woman.
She has good genes from a number of different standpoints, not just the ones that she is wearing. But why people are losing their minds over it is a mystery to me.
And then to turn the government shutdown into something just extra creepy, as well as just anti-American, bring in MAGA Republican Senator Mike Lee from Utah, and he goes, Donald Trump's hatchet man, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vogt, the author of Project 2025, who Donald Trump said earlier in the morning was of Project 2025 fame. He goes, Russ Vogt has dreamed about destroying Democratic states and taking away the funding of Democratic states and cities since.
Anyway, this was just a test to do live, so I know I gotta turn the thing sideways, but peace out. Hope you're having a great day. Blessed be X. Okay. Bye-bye.